Have they made progress with the strike?
They're picketing right now, so I think it's the early stages. I would think it might take a little bit with this one.
When someone crosses the writer strike, that's some dirty shit. They cross the picket line.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody doing that yet.
I think Ellen did. I had a buddy of mine who was writing on Ellen. Everybody kind of knows now what she's really all about. And that's another one of those. Like, I'm so nice and I'm so sweet. Being behind the scenes.
With all the money in the world, you'd think Ellen DeGeneres could keep her secrets locked up tight. But nope. Joe Rogan just cracked them open like one of his morning protein shakes. What happens when Mr. Podcast Truth Serum sets his sights on America's favorite dancing daytime host? You get a truth drop so bold it might just make your latte go cold. If you believed Ellen was all sunshine and decorative pillows, it's time to take another look. Joe brought the receipts. Just don't expect applause from a studio audience this time.
Yeah, but
don't hate on the people who are doing it. That's why you're in that position.
Did you see what Ellen did? This is really, really kind of funny. She said, being stuck here in quarantine is like being in prison. I haven't changed my clothes in days, and everyone's gay. It's funny.
That's funny.
It's funny. And she got attacked. Do you think this is prison? My grandmother died. You're living in a mansion. That kind of. But I think it's probably partly because that guy came out and said, hey, Ellen is mean. Post your stories about Ellen being mean.
Do you see the stories?
Ellen DeGeneres once encouraged the world to be kind, then did everything she could to make that message hard to take seriously. Because nothing says kindness like creating a tense workplace, letting people go over small mistakes, and giving off the emotional warmth of a broken self-checkout machine.
Changes at the Ellen Show after multiple allegations that it was a toxic place to work. 3 top producers have now, quote, parted ways. But the horror stories keep coming. One guest on the show telling Inside Edition that she was told, whatever you do, don't be funnier than...
And now, like your unpredictable uncle with a mic, Joe Rogan seems to have decided he's done watching Ellen's daytime reign go unchallenged. After all, there's only so many times you can see someone dance on TV before realizing it might be a distraction from what's really happening behind the scenes. Let's be honest. Ellen didn't run her show like a cheerful celebrity playground. It felt more like a low-budget psychological drama. Smiling for the cameras felt less like fun and more like emotional survival. Behind those sparkling blue eyes, maybe just a stress ball shaped like an assistant's fading hope.
It's like a beautiful name, Isis.
Ellen's rough.
Ellen is like an old...
But it's a rough one now.
It's a rough one now because she was running Abu Ghraib in the back of her show. That's a rough one. She's out there dancing with Kristen Bell, and in the back, there's people that are getting up on the rack like this.
It's so weird when you see, like, a lot of people saying that someone who seems so nice is not nice at all.
She doesn't seem nice, but that's people have a very poor judge of character. She doesn't seem nice. It seems
Joe Rogan, who usually chats with MMA fighters, alien theorists, and the occasional psychedelic adventurer, has now aimed his sharp questions at Ellen. And somehow, it's more satisfying than watching a flat earther try to explain gravity using a pancake.
The Ellen situation.
Yeah.
You know, people found out that Ellen was mean, and all these people came out and said, Ellen's actually a bitch. And everybody, whoa, can't believe it. And she lost everything. She fell apart, disappeared, because people found out that this character that she was portraying in a half an hour on a television show is not really who she was. My buddy Greg, who was one of her writers, was like, she's a piece of shit. And he was like, she's a...
Here's the thing. Ellen wasn't just a tough boss. She was the final boss of subtle chaos. The culture behind her show was so unhealthy, it made a Chernobyl tour sound like a spa weekend. And then came Joe Rogan, armed with his nonsense radar, honed from years of UFC commentary, ready to drop verbal truth bombs. He took all that Be Kind branding, blended it with his protein shake, and launched it straight into the stratosphere. Sure, Joe doesn't have a PhD in workplace behavior, but even he could tell when someone dressed like a labradoodle was actually running a Hollywood pressure cooker. Ellen's public image? It was like a digital hug, warm from far away, but try to get too close and you'd get zapped by the artificial glow. Her version of kindness had conditions: limited time, fixed angles, and a quiet understanding. No eye contact allowed. The stories from her staff didn't trickle. They poured out like kombucha at a Malibu drum circle. There were claims of people being warned not to look her in the eyes, which made solar eclipses feel like a safer option. One person, allegedly, lost their job after medical leave. Another said they were threatened after reporting workplace harassment. Somehow, all of this didn't match the fun-loving image of daytime TV's Queen of Kindness.
Morning to you, Hedda. What do you think of the news? Has this come as a shock?
Hi. No, not a shock at all. The viewers have spoken. Her ratings have been in the toilet for a long, long time now. Her show has not been fun. It has not been interesting. And she's not really, by the way, stepping down. The viewers fired.
Meanwhile, Joe Rogan is out, here letting guests talk about DMT and elk meat for 3 hours straight without anyone getting fired for blinking too loud. The contrast is almost surreal. Rogan, who once chatted with a guy convinced Atlantis is under a Costco, somehow comes off as the emotionally grounded one in this side-by-side. Ellen's show felt like a study in contradictions. All smiles up front, quiet stress behind the scenes. If Willy Wonka's chocolate factory doubled as a psychological maze, it'd still be less puzzling than the vibe backstage at Ellen. Then Joe shows up, basically saying, "Enough with the performance." He called out the fact that this daytime host built an empire around kindness but couldn't manage basic decency with the people closest to her, like the guy bringing her coffee. That's not just irony. That's world-class self-sabotage dressed in yoga pants. And to top it off, Ellen ended her final show talking about growth and gratitude, as if nearly 2 decades of mistreatment could be washed away with a farewell speech. Meanwhile, Rogan's out here dropping raw opinions, flexing biceps, and still, somehow, seems less toxic by comparison.
Out all the time. She doesn't seem nice. It's very forced. And whatever, you're allowed to be a bitch, right? You're allowed to be a bitch. You're allowed to be nasty to people. You're accomplished. You're a comedian. You did the whole thing. What you're not allowed to do is have a Guantanamo Bay situation in the backstage of your show where everybody's walking around afraid for their life, and it's like Abu Ghraib where they're hooked up to wires and they
Dogs
have like
around them.
Yeah, she's got dogs and hoods. If an intern's late, they have a hood on. I don't support that.
She used to end each show by telling her viewers, "Be kind to one another." Looking back, it's almost cute how long it took people to realize that might have been less of a message and more of a warning. Be kind, or else I'll haunt your dreams and revoke your parking pass. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan's podcast might be a mix of bro science and wild theories, but you never hear anyone say, "Don't look Joe in the eye or he'll drain your aura." That level of fear? That was strictly reserved for Ellen, Queen of Passive-aggressive island. Let's not forget the way guests were treated on her show. If you were an A-lister, you got the full red carpet, compliments, glitter, and probably an awkward dance-off. But if you were a rising artist or worse, part of the crew, you were playing career roulette. One day you're helping with set lights, the next you're locked in a closet with a sticky note that says, "Smile more." It says a lot when Joe Rogan, who once hosted a show where people ate insects for prize money, looks at your workplace and goes, "Wow, that feels a bit much."
Like, they're gonna find the thing if you don't go away. You gotta have a good run, and then when you have a good run, you step back and you go, okay, I'm still gonna do my thing, but like, I'm not. I mean, there's only a few jobs in entertainment, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of the cancel culture shit is probably these motherfuckers want those jobs.
Ooh.
They're like, how long is this bitch gonna be dancing? I can dance with Hillary Clinton. I could do the Charleston with Henry Kissinger, whatever the fuck she does out there.
The Charleston, is that what it is?
She goes out there, do the Charleston. She's got war criminals. Her and Bush are jumping around. I mean,
that's right. She was buddies with Bush. That was like
she's
one of the
a
first
CIA.
Ellen didn't just make mistakes. She turned them into a routine. There was a pattern to her behavior, like she was crafting a villain arc for an animated film. Every claim, every story, every emotional former staffer told a version of the same tale. A place that looked cheerful on camera, but felt more like a funhouse mirror behind the scenes, where every smile came with a hint of pressure. You could be doing your job flawlessly, but if you breathed too loudly near her salad, fired. Needed a day off? Fired. Gave off a vibe she didn't like? Also fired. It was like playing Minesweeper with your job on the line. Joe Rogan isn't exactly known for subtlety, but when even he is pointing out the problems, that's not just a red flag. That's a neon sign flashing in all caps. And while Joe calls it out from the comfort of his podcast studio, somehow it lands with more honesty than 19 seasons of overly produced daytime charm ever did. Remember when Ellen tried to make a comeback by doing an empathy tour? It felt more like a teenager apologizing for getting caught with a vape pen. Technically sorry, but mostly just embarrassed. That speech had less heart than a soggy cereal box. Meanwhile, Joe didn't bother with PR makeovers or image consultants. He just laughed, kept talking, and didn't pretend to be your friend. He's not offering you herbal tea and then quietly calling security when you sneeze. What you see is what you get. A podcast mic, some gym muscles, and zero filters. Ellen, on the other hand, built an empire around the illusion of kindness, handing out shoes and smiles like a softer version of Oprah, but with a sharp edge. And now it's all coming apart, not with fireworks, but with the slow unraveling of a pre-written joke. Awkward, forced, and honestly, kind of sad.
Now.
Well, I'd like to see her work on a farm where she can relate with all the animals and the pets and the dogs and the cows and the pigs, because she can relate to animals far more than she does with people. I was not able to have any connection with her, make any eye contact. And here's the thing, it's not just me or three of us. There were over 100 employees over the 19 years that walk away with this sickened feeling, about working there. As much as I loved my job as a booker and producer, I was almost relieved when I got fired, because it was like I want to take a shower. It was like a whole new dawn. So I don't feel that she has the trust anymore.
Joe Rogan just pointed at the Emperor's new clothes and burst out laughing, because underneath all the vegan quotes and designer cardigans was a boss who made Gordon Ramsay look like Mr. Rogers. Ellen's empire didn't crumble from one single scandal. It collapsed because the cheerful image she built couldn't support the weight of her own ego anymore. And when someone like Rogan, who casually discusses bear attacks as if he's reading bedtime stories, calls you out for being overly intense at work, maybe it's time to rethink your brand. Let's talk facts. Ellen's top producers were accused of fostering a workplace filled with tension and inappropriate behavior. There were internal investigations, sudden resignations, and that one dimly lit apology video that felt like Cruella de Vil trying damage control with a ring light and a cue card. Rogan didn't need to exaggerate any of it. The reality was dramatic enough. Over a dozen former employees came forward. That's not a coincidence. That's a Yelp review with trauma as a bonus feature. Meanwhile, Ellen kept smiling through it all, dancing with celebrities, and pretending that asking for fair treatment didn't earn people a backstage cold shoulder. The audience noticed. Guests started looking less like they were thrilled to be on set, and more like they were fulfilling community service hours.
Stephen Paddock, and do not ask me for sources, but Stephen Paddock.
Who's that?
He was the guy that shot up the Vegas concert. That was a very tragic thing. Listen to this. The only guy that saw Stephen Paddock alive, his name is Jesus Campos. He was a guard at Mandalay Bay. He got interviewed nowhere else. You know where he got interviewed in the beginning? Ellen.
Really?
Weird. And then they went on, if you could find that clip, they went on with a weird diagram of how it happened, and Ellen's showing the people how it happened. Not like an emotional, how are you feeling, how are you holding up? It was a weird diagram of and then he went to the left and to the right. It was very strange to, look, what the hell's going on? This is a daytime.
Rogan could have ignored the whole thing. But he didn't. Because even the king of elk meat and cold plunges apparently has limits, and fake kindness at the expense of real people crosses that line. Somewhere Ellen's PR team was probably panicking in their fair trade hemp outfits the second Joe mentioned her name. Because you can't silence him with hashtags, Rogan isn't your average influencer. He's like a living Reddit thread with a microphone, and Ellen walked straight into the storm. And of course, she can't clap back, not without admitting that maybe, just maybe, years of reports about backstage mistreatment weren't just tabloid fluff. And that's the thing. Joe didn't go after her for attention. He doesn't need the clicks. The man has a $200 million Spotify deal, and fans who will watch him interview someone who lives in a van and eats moss for breakfast. This wasn't about headlines. It was personal. It was about pulling the curtain back on the great illusionist of daytime television. Because Ellen wasn't just a tough boss. She was the final boss of contradiction. She built a brand on sunshine and smiles, but brought storms to her own studio. And all Rogan did was flick the lights on, and let the world see the mold behind the paint.
Look how she's got like an antenna from someone's Buick that she's popped off and she's using it as a pointer.
But why the hell is this happening on like a daytime show where this is weird?
Where'd she get that pointer?
I don't know. She stole it off an intern's car.
Why wouldn't you just use your finger? Like if that was you, if it was your show, the Tim Dillon show, wouldn't you just point?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also a giant screen behind her, so they could have just put it on that screen.
So, but she's using this thing. I find it very strange. I don't know why.
Oh, and remember, if you ever find yourself on a show where they hand you free sneakers but ask you not to make eye contact with the host, run, fast. Even Joe Rogan would back you up on that. Now, to be clear, this isn't about disliking someone who enjoys a good dance break or smiles. A lot. Everyone deserves a boss who acts more like a real person and less like a silent enforcer. But Ellen? She somehow took a show that should have felt like a cozy hug and turned it into something that felt more like a high-stakes negotiation. And Joe Rogan calling her out? That's the ultimate mic drop moment. The truth is, Ellen's downfall didn't come out of nowhere. People whispered for years, but the audience wanted to believe in the magic. It's easier to ignore the rumors when someone's handing out gifts and puppies on live TV. But Joe's spotlight isn't a soft studio glow. It's a harsh floodlight, revealing every crack in the set. What's left now? A canceled show, a dented legacy, and a message that says, smile, but don't expect me to mean it. Meanwhile, Joe's podcast keeps rolling, part chaos, part honesty, reminding us that sometimes the best way to deal with a fake smile is to call out what's behind it. So next time you hear someone say, be kind, maybe take a moment to ask, are we talking Ellen kind or Joe kind? Because one comes with hugs and hidden agendas. The other hands you a mic and says, speak your truth. And honestly, the world could use a little more of that.